Welcome, everybody. It's got about 8-10 years ago, I put out a retirement crisis white paper. And in this, I was basically discussing some of the issues that I saw retirees were going to have moving forward. Obviously, we've had some issues in regards to pensions and breakdowns in pensions. We have the sort of Damocles hanging over everyone when it comes to Social Security and what may happen there. And again, a complete unwillingness in Washington, D.C. to deal with the problem. There's something else as well that I discussed. I talked about demographics. Obviously, this was pre-COVID, and it was also pre-fentanyl. So the mortality rates, if you take a look at mortality rates here in the United States, saying, oh, it's getting worse, they are. But, if you reach a certain age, then the likelihood that you're going to live to this is becoming much greater. It's a reality. And again, these numbers that were put together for Social Security and many of these other plans were done when mortality was a lot lower than it is today. Now, again, I can get into the nuances of politics and Social Security going back to the founder of it, and it wasn't FDR. The original concept was the Kaiser in Germany did this. Actually, there was an uproar there because when you could receive your Social Security plan, I mean, it was like a 10-year difference between when people were dying and when you could actually get it. Anyway, let's put that aside. Let's look to my experience in dealing with people from all over the world, in particular, obviously, right here in the United States for decades now, and what I see. I'm telling you what I see and what my experience has been. People who retire, everyone's different. And again, I don't like painting with a broad brush. Many of them, these conversations that we have, many of them end up regretting it. Or not so much regretting it. They don't mind leaving. Okay, you do a job or a certain task for an extended period of time. Many, they get out of it and they said, I wish I had done something else or done something different. Again, we're dealing with the inflationary aspects that have been getting worse instead of better. And again, in my retirement crisis white paper, we were talking about inflation back then. Nothing was going down in price, and the bare necessities of life, like we've talked about, those things that are most important to you and I when it comes to inflation, have never gone down. All right, yeah, you may see gasoline prices or maybe your energy prices come down, but you're talking about healthcare, you're talking about food, you're talking about gym memberships, you're talking about tolls, you're talking about your Starbucks coffee, the stuff that you utilize every single day. For the most part, those prices just don't come down, and it eats into people's savings, without a doubt. Well, there was a story today, AARP data showing that freelancing is on the rise among older workers. More and more senior citizens are getting into doing gig work, DoorDash and Uber and other things. They said the latest study of workers 40 and older found that more than 27% are now doing freelance or gig work. Of those, 89% said their primary motivation was to make extra money. Another 87% said flexible work hours were another major driver for the decision. So what's wrong with making a couple extra bucks? What type of retirement do you want to? Do you want to have to? Do you want to have to cut, coupons and have to go out to dinner at 4:00? I mean, that's your thing. That's your thing. Okay. But if you're used to doing a certain, used to going out to dinner with your significant other at, 7:30, 8:00 at night, you're living somewhere and, you want to get the blue light special. You got to go to 4:00. You want to do that during retirement. You want to change the way that you live and make those sacrifices for what? You don't have to. You don't have to do that. Yeah, everybody paints this picture of retire, you're gonna get the goal, watch it. For some people, okay. I last weekend on the radio show, I talked about narratives. and dispelling them, something that we do often here on the program. And we mentioned mentioned two narratives that unfortunately are not taught enough, and one comes from Socrates, which is know thyself. The other one was Jesus, love thy neighbor as thyself. It's these are things that we teach here on the program. These are things that we believe should be taught. But again, knowing thyself, we'll talk about that right now. Know thyself. You have to know who you are. You can't lie to yourself. And you have to kind of craft your retirement in and around that, not what other people are telling you to do. I suggested, in my retirement crisis white paper, I threw out the concept of the 3-day work week. Listen, I get it. Okay. I've been working ungodly hours now for decades. I talked to my kids about what I had to do when I was younger, and, going from, football practice or lacrosse practice, basketball practice, then going to clean an office building, then going to do my homework, working on weekends, bartended, the millions of jobs that I've had, not to mention, you own your own business. It's a 7-day-a-week job. It never really ends. And sometimes, it's starting to get, I need to calm down a little bit here. I'm doing too much. If I don't get up and out of the office, that's like actually something that I'm going to have to do. Talk about knowing thyself. Okay. My kids aren't in any sort of sports season. I will just keep working. And because they're not dragging me out of well, it's not dragging, it's good drag. It's like, I'm not going to a ball game here or there or doing a practice or something like that. You need that type of a break. Well, again, as to when all my kids are gone, I'm going to have to, start picking up some more hobbies, which is okay. But again, you have to adjust your life in this fashion. When I'm talking about a 3-day work week, I'm saying, okay, you don't want to work, and it's good. You have like a Thanksgiving week. Thanksgiving week was awesome. It still is awesome. I love Thanksgiving week. Why do I love Thanksgiving week? Thanksgiving, you're off on Thanksgiving. You're off, and everybody kind of skips on Friday. So you get that 4-day weekend there. So if you can turn your work week into 3 days, make some extra money so you don't have to go out to dinner at 4:00 and you can go on more vacations and do more stuff. So what? It's good for you. It's good for your mind. It is. You ever see these guys like Charlie Munger? Charlie Munger, again, I forget, he's almost 100 years old. Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett's partner. You see him in interviews? He's pretty damn sharp. Pretty damn sharp because he stays involved. He keeps his mind active. And again, if you don't want to work, you volunteer time to do something. But, you see stories like this, gig work, it's great. That's extra bucks in someone's pocket. That's great for the overall economy. I see people that I just don't get it. I mean, I don't know how you can check out. I don't. And I've also talked about this in terms of the way we run things in society. Again, this is kind of going off the beaten track, where I think, people want to retire. Let's say they've been a chemist at some, I don't know, company somewhere, chemist or an engineer, whatever it may be. And you entice these people. Okay, they want to, they don't want to be working all those hours. Why don't you entice them to come back and teach a class or two at a local school? Wow, novel concept. I know teachers unions are going to hate that shit because they didn't take bullshit education degrees. But let me ask you a question. Would you rather have an actual, I don't know, chemist teaching your kid chemistry rather than the kid with the education degree teaching your kid chemistry? Just saying. Actually, I wrote it just popped into my head. I wrote about this. It was one of the, this guy was a PhD and I think it was, I don't know. He was one of the, and he also was the former CEO Lockheed Martin, and he was retired. He wanted to teach school. Want to retire and go teach school. Want to retire and go teach school. I would love at some point in time. Let me be honest with you. I would love. My kids are gone. Again, we continue to grow our business. I would love to, at some point in time, go back and teach class, go teach school. I'll never let me do that. I have to go, and I'd have to take all sorts of nonsensical education class. Really? I mean, you can't take a look that, this is what I've been doing, in essence, is teaching for decades. You don't think I can handle it? But anyway, neither here nor there. Okay, keep your mind sharp. There's nothing wrong with it. And you didn't put any stigma attached to senior citizens working. It's one of the best things. It's one of the healthiest things you can do. Don't check out. Anyway. Speaking of Social Security here, talked a little bit about this yesterday, and I'm going to spend some more time this weekend on the big show. I've written many columns about Social Security over years. We're going to go into the history and what's going on. And again, I'm not surprised. It's disheartening that you have, Washington, D.C. doesn't want to deal with the problem at all. They don't want to deal with it. The last time anything was done was back with Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill, where they made some adjustments, tried to do some things under George W. Bush. Again, you're gonna take your money, you're gonna gamble at the stock market. I'm like, people, do you see how much money some of these Scandinavian countries have with their sovereign wealth funds, or some of these Middle Eastern countries have with their sovereign wealth funds, because they invest their money. Anyway, so story today is Andrew Biggs writes for the American Enterprise Institute, opinion piece in the Wall Street Journal, talking about Social Security, and what he says is he should, basically put a cap on the amount of money that can be paid out. And he goes, Social Security is often described as a safety net against poverty in old age. But if every senior simply received a benefit equal to the 2022 poverty threshold, which is just over $14,000 for a single retiree and about $17,600 for couples, Social Security's $1.3 trillion annual cost would be cut in half. Andrew, are you flipping kidding me, man? $14,000. Social Security is expensive because it's more than a safety net. The average new retiree in 2021 received an annual benefit of nearly $21,000. 1.5 times the poverty threshold without counting their own savings. The highest earning Americans receive even more than that, with the maximum benefit at the normal retirement age of 67 coming in at $42,000. That blows through any reasonable idea of a safety net. Andrew, buddy, I've been maxing out. I've been maxing out my money into this plan for God knows how long. I got a better idea. Why do we need this? Why can't people just, you could purchase a freaking fixed annuity, for crying out loud, and do better than this? This is garbage, man, is what this is. I get this guy's, this was a conservative here. Social Security's maximum benefit increases every year. In 2000, it was $28,300, about a third less than today. By 2035, the maximum Social Security benefit will reach $49,825. By 2050, $59,234. For a single high-income retiree, $42,000 should be more than enough to get by in most parts of the country. That's why in future years, the maximum Social Security retirement benefit should be capped at the 2023 value, adjusted for inflation. To receive the top benefit, a person must have worked 35 years or more at the maximum salary taxable by Social Security, which would have averaged to about $117,000 a year for somebody who's retiring today. Is it going to fix Social Security by capping it? No. So why the hell do it? He's just saying it's a step in the right direction. No, it's just going to piss people off. It's a loser for me. It's a loser for me. And all the small business owners out there, we get whacked twice. Now you got to make the employee contribution. You have to make the employer contribution, even though it's still coming out of your bloody pocket. It's still coming out of my pocket. Doesn't make any difference. Okay? I for the life of me, if you could allow people, I want to opt out. Okay. Never going to happen. Not today's client. Again, let's hold on for that Social Security. Give me a frickin' break. Good, you do the math yourself. Go back. You could go on the website. Check for yourself. You could see how much money you've contributed to Social Security for your entire life. Imagine if you took that money every single year and you put it into an S&P index fund. Dollar cost average every single year. Good years, bad years, 35, 40 years later. What type of return? What type of money would you actually get? People would be wealthy. People would be extraordinarily wealthy. No, can't put it into the stock market. It's too volatile. The ups and downs. Yeah, it has ups and downs over the short term, but most certainly not over the long term. And then you factor in dividends and the pay. Oh, come on. Again, Social Security wacky shacks out there drive me nuts. Anyway. Savers will benefit from return to sound money. It's Joe Davis from Vanguard talking about what's going on in the overall bond markets and the overall climate when it comes to investing. He's got a very similar philosophy that I have. The fact that rates being up where they are is not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing at all. Again, you hear this sometimes, and people are like, for example. Everybody was Maria Bartiromo yesterday on her program. They're lamenting the fact that you have higher mortgage rates. Okay, you got higher mortgage rates. The principal's going to reset. But my first house, I paid over 7%. You take a look at what the 10-year Treasury was paying out during the 1990s, during the dot-com run-up. Pretty good. You can't even call it easy money. Yet there was a lot of economic activity, a lot of investment banking activity. Obviously, it's done a hell of a lot different than we were doing things over the past 8 to 10 years. But it's not the end of the world. What it does is it creates a better balance between cash, bonds, and stocks overall. Numbers, I go through some of these earnings reports. Exxon, $55.7 billion profit. Caterpillar's numbers were good. Again, their earnings were a little bit lower, but their revenues were 20%, blew away expectations. A lot of their problems with their earnings had to do with currency issues. Not a big deal. Their business is strong. Pretty much across the board. A lot of good numbers. We're still at that point in time where it's up. More than 70% of the companies have reported it have exceeded expectations. Sky hasn't fallen. The world hasn't ended as of yet. Great commentary piece. Again, echo chamber from this program. Simone Gao, who is does a program online. It's called Zooming In with Simone Gao. I haven't watched it yet, but this is an editorial talking about why China will never lead on tech. Again, master the obvious. Why will China never lead on tech? Because they're communist. And communism is something, there's no push into imagination and creativity when it comes to communism. It's just not going to work. Hey, you take a look around the globe and you take a look at the societies and the economies that are most free. Those are the ones where you're going to get ingenuity. You're going to get people who are free thinkers. There's no thinking outside the box in China. You might get canceled. Social credits. I mean, you don't do things. And again, that goes into on this column talking about how business is done in China in the tech sector and how you go about getting money. And it's about where you are in the Communist Party, how far up you have risen in the ranks. Now, I'm not saying that we don't have a lot of that infecting our society, because we do. We do have a lot of that still infecting our society, especially when it comes to government initiatives, green jobs, crap, government sending money to private enterprise, which I've said from the get-go I can't stand. There's nothing more. What's awful is that the public-private partnerships is awful, okay? You don't want public-private partnerships. No. That's government choosing winners and losers. I know it sounds all soft and cuddly, but that's what they do in China, and it doesn't work out too well. Biden administration is considering cutting off Huawei from U.S. suppliers. Yesterday on the program, again, I brought up, you had the Air Force general talking about how we're going to be at war with China in 2 years. He says 2025. And again, does the right hand know what the left hand is doing? Does it make any sense whatsoever? Why would we be shipping anything to China if that's the case? Now, I don't believe that to be the case. And I do believe that you have to continue to do trade and to do business, because that will keep you away from fighting wars, God willing. But if there's national security concerns, whatever it may be, I get it. I mean, it's not a difficult thing to do. It really isn't. To take a look at certain industries and say, you know what? It may cost us more to do it here in the United States for whatever reason it may be, but this is a national security issue. It's not a national security issue to have Nikes put together, sneakers put together in China. Sending chips and having some certain supply chains that are reliant upon them. No. And you know what? I'm going to take China out of the frickin' equation. Okay? Any country, there should be certain industry where you say, you know what? We need to source that here. We need to do this here. Or we need to obviously be able to flip a switch and turn on whatever we need to turn on here. I mean, for crying out loud, we saw what happened during the pandemic. Couldn't get this, couldn't get that. Aren't some of these things important? Yeah. Yeah, they are. And solve the problem. Again, you want to, the United States, we're citing national security concerns in regards to selling certain supplies. I guess Huawei can't even put out 5G capable phones because they can't get a hold of our chips. And I'm saying to myself, and you got this these generals in their infinite wisdom saying we're going to war with China. They can't even figure out a way to copy our chips to put out a 5G phone. And we're worried about them. I don't know. Again, some of the stuff is makes you scratch your head. Couple crypto stories here. Celebrities who out there endorsing crypto and NFTs, they're getting sued now. By not, they didn't disclose how they were going to be compensated for their endorsements of said cryptos or ape NFTs or whatever it may be. Again, sorry, I'm just a personal responsibility guy. Okay. You decided to go out and buy some NFT because Madonna told you to. well, or Tom Brady or Larry David. Again, stupid is as stupid does. Sorry, I don't mean to offend, okay? But deep down inside what you did was stupid. No surprise here. Sam Bankman-Fried sought leniency from foreign regulators. He was trying to buy his way out. He, with the Bahamian authorities and praising them and letting the Bahamian citizens pull their money out of FTX while it was closed from everybody else wanting to move assets. Yeah, he's just recently tried to get a hold of his $500 million stake, not his, the $500 million stake in Robinhood. This guy's a piece of work. He really is. But he's got some high-end lawyers working for him. So who knows how that's going to turn out. Americans say a lack of leadership from President Biden and Congress is the country's biggest problem, outpacing inflation. Immigration crisis and the state of the economy are some of the other ones that were on the list, but lack of leadership. Yeah. I've explained this before. I kind of given up on Washington, D.C. Again, I've said this before. I don't want Ron DeSantis to run for the presidency. I think he's going to get more done in Florida, quite frankly. I have a story as well. You had Greg Abbott announcing that Texas is going to be cracking down more, appointing a border czar because of all the illegal migrant crossings. Again, that's what states need to do. You got to reclaim states' rights, 10th Amendment, and be sanctuaries or little laboratories, as Thomas Jefferson said. You're trying things out. People are going to see what's working, and then they're going to gravitate to your state. There's nothing wrong with that. Leadership, in this country, it's again, like I said, I'm almost at the point in time where I almost tune out national news. I look for local leaders and governors and people that are doing things in certain areas of the country. That's what I look to, because all you get in Washington, D.C. is nonsense. Say we get tomorrow, you got Biden and McCarthy meeting talking about the debt ceiling and not going to negotiate in regards to spending cuts and what we're going to do here, and entitlements are off the table. Again, it's all becoming the adults and peanuts to me. Like wah. Anyway, I'm going to do this story quickly. There was this was in Newsweek. Okay, left-wing rag. So Newsweek, Kevin Bass, a medical school. He's a medical school student. Put out an op-ed saying it's time for the scientific community to admit we were wrong about COVID and it costs lives. And he talks about how he was staunchly supported all of the efforts, the public health authorities, when it came to COVID-19. He was wrong. The scientific community was wrong, and it cost lives. He says, I can see now that the scientific community, from the CDC to the WHO to the FDA and the representatives, repeatedly overstated the evidence and misled the public about its own views and policies, including on natural versus artificial immunity, school closures and disease transmission, aerosol spread, mask mandates, vaccine effectiveness and safety, especially among the young. All of these were scientific mistakes at the time, not in hindsight. Amazingly, some of these obfuscations continue to the present day. But perhaps more important than any individual error was how inherently flawed the overall approach of the scientific community was and continues to be. It was flawed in a way that undermined its efficacy and resulted in thousands, if not millions, of preventable deaths. What we did not properly appreciate is that the preferences determine what scientific expertise is used, and that our preferences might be, indeed, our preferences were very different from many of the people that we serve. We created policy based on our preferences, then justified it using data. And then we portrayed those opposing our efforts as misguided, ignorant, selfish, and evil. Yep, I was in that camp. Oh my God, the nasty messages and emails from people. How many people saw on their member back on social media, your neighbors at the, stay home, stay safe. Shut the. Anyway, we made science a team sport. I've talked about that as well with politics. Turn everything into Yankees, Red Sox. You gotta. It's not a team sport, and this science not a team sport either. Doing so, we made it no longer science. It became us versus them. And they responded the only way anyone might expect them to, by resisting. We excluded important parts of the population from policy development and castigated critics, which meant that we deployed a monolithic response across an exceptionally diverse nation, forged a society more fractured than ever, and exacerbated long-standing health and economic disparities. Our emotional response and ingrained partisanship prevented us from seeing the full impact of our actions on the people we are supposed to serve. We systematically minimized the downsides of our interventions we imposed without the input, consent, and recognition of those forced to live with them. In doing so, we violated the autonomy of those who would be most negatively impacted by our policies: the poor, the working class, small business owners, Blacks, Latinos, children. These populations were overlooked because they were made invisible to us by their systematic exclusion from the dominant corporatized media machine that presumed omnipotence. Most of us did not speak up in support of alternative views, and many of us tried to suppress them. When strong scientific voices like world-renowned Stanford professors John Ioannidis, Jay Bhattacharya, Scott Atlas, University of California, San Francisco professors, Vinay Prasad, Monica Gandhi, sounded the alarm on behalf of vulnerable communities. They faced severe censure by relentless mobs of critics and detractors in the scientific community, often not on the basis of fact, but solely on the basis of differences in scientific opinion. When former President Trump pointed out the downsides of intervention, he was dismissed publicly as a buffoon. And when Dr. Anthony Fauci opposed Trump and became the hero of the public health community, we gave him our support to do and say what he wanted, even when he was wrong. Trump was not remotely perfect, nor were the academic critics of consensus policy, but the scorn that we laid on them was a disaster for public trust in the pandemic response. Our approach alienated large segments of the population from what should have been a national collaborative project. And we paid the price. The rage of those marginalized by the expert class exploded onto and dominated social media. Lacking the scientific lexicon to express their disagreement, many dissidents turned to conspiracy theories and a cottage industry of scientific contortionists to make their case against the expert class consensus that dominated the pandemic mainstream. Labeling this speech misinformation and blaming it on scientific illiteracy and ignorance, the government conspired with big tech to aggressively suppress it, erasing the valid political concerns of the government's opponents. And this despite the fact that pandemic policy was created by a razor-thin sliver of American society who anointed themselves to preside over the working class, members of academia, government, medicine, journalism, tech, public health, who are highly educated and privileged. From the comfort of their privilege, this elite prizes paternalism as opposed to average Americans who laud self-reliance and those whose daily lives routinely demand that they reckon with risk. That many of our leaders neglected to consider the lived experience of those across the class divide is unconscionable. Incomprehensible to us due to this class divide, we severely judge lockdown critics as lazy, backwards, even evil. We dismissed as grifters those who represented their interest. We believe misinformation energized the ignorant, and we refuse to accept that such people simply had a different valid point of view. We crafted policy for people without consulting them. If our public health officials had led with less hubris, the course of the pandemic in the United States may have had a very different outcome with far fewer lost lives. Instead, we've witnessed a massive and ongoing loss of life in America due to distrust of vaccines and the healthcare system, a massive concentration in wealth by already wealthy elites, a rise in suicides and gun violence, especially among the poor, a near doubling of the rate of depression and anxiety disorders, especially among the young, a catastrophic loss, again, this is something we've discussed at length here on the program, catastrophic loss of educational attainment among already disadvantaged children and among those most vulnerable, a massive loss of trust in healthcare, science, scientific authorities, and political leaders more broadly. My motivation for this, for writing this, it's simple to me that for public trust to be restored in science, scientists should publicly discuss what went right and what went wrong during the pandemic and where we could have done better. It's okay to be wrong and admit where one was wrong and what one learned. And that's a central part of the way science works. Yet I fear that many are too entrenched in groupthink and too afraid to publicly take responsibility to do this. Solving these problems in the long term requires a greater commitment to pluralism and tolerance in our institutions, including the inclusion of critical, if unpopular, voices. Intellectual elitism, credentialism, and classism must end. Restoring trust in public health and our democracy depends on it. Again, it's a little bit more there, but spend some time. Yeah, a lot of these things we went over here on the podcast, on the radio show. Scientists, we cited this stuff. I went through history, did as best we possibly could, saw the nonsense and what was going on. And I think most of us saw it, but I think many people just take comfort in just following orders. This is what the elites tell us. This is what we're told to do. Shut up and listen to them. Again, it's you think you're being smart, but the real smart people in life, we talked about this earlier on in the program, are the ones that have imagination, the ones that question, the ones that are curious. I have zero faith in anything that comes out of the government. Anything. Hey, telling me something, I'm like, what? Again, they haven't proven to be reliable. You take a look at what transpired during the pandemic, and I guess I'm not the only layman out there that could see right through this. Many of us did, and again, I'm not a blue collar worker anymore. Used to be and do that type of work. I try to consider myself as well read as possible, but I also understand that I don't know everything. I don't. And I, the capacity to listen to others and to, take in what other people are seeing or saying is what you need to do. Again, we went over the scientific method here when this was going on. And I said something was taught in sixth grade science class that I remember from sixth grade science class. And it became about consensus. Science is not, it's not a democratic endeavor. It's not. So I kind of getting off the beaten track here a little bit. Because again, I love my history stuff, and I don't know where I saw this. I forget. I was reading it. It now popped up in a couple spots. They just uncovered evidence in Ethiopia that guess what? Everything that they thought they knew about human beings on the planet and how long we've been here and various different societies is wrong. Wrong. Like I said, consensus a couple years ago said this. Guess what? Consensus was wrong. Takes one thing to disprove a theory, and that's what science is. Anyway, have a great day, buddy. Watchdog on Wall Street.com, watchdogonwallstreet.com. God bless. We'll see you.